What if everything you've been taught about angels and demons was upside down? What if the so-called angel of death wasn't just a destroyer, but the keeper of forbidden Gnosis, the poison of God that dissolves illusions and awakens hidden truth? For centuries, Samael has been erased, feared, and misunderstood. Yet in Jewish mysticism, Gnostic texts, and ancient scriptures, he appears again and again as both executioner and revealer, both serpent of Eden and dark angel of judgment. And here lies the paradox. To encounter Samael is to risk everything, but also to glimpse the secrets that elites and mystics have guarded for ages. This isn't a tale for the faint of heart. It's a journey into the shadows of Kabbalah, apocryphal writings, and mystical philosophy, where Samael and Lilith emerge as forces that terrify the orthodox yet liberate the seeker. In this video, the forbidden Gnosis of Samael, the poison of God and the angel of death, you'll uncover why his name was hidden, why rulers invoked him in secrecy, and why his poison still lingers as a mirror of our deepest fears. And the question you'll be left with is simple. Is Samael a demon, an angel, or the reflection of your own shadow staring back at you? They say names hold power, but what happens when a name itself is a paradox? Samael, often translated as the poison of God, stands as both a blessing and a curse. To utter his name is to invoke the shadow of divine will, a reminder that not every messenger from above brings comfort or healing. Samael, angel of death, is not easily categorized. He is both a whisper of judgment and the executioner of divine law. And isn't it strange how the same lips that bless can also wound? His very name reveals the mystery. To encounter Samael is to face forbidden Gnosis, the unsettling truth that poison tui can be holy. When seekers first hear of him, they might expect only darkness, yet the reality is far more complex. Samael in Kabbalah appears not just as a destroyer, but also as a force of balance, an instrument of divine justice cloaked in shadows. Think about it. Every system needs something, or someone, to dissolve what no longer serves its purpose. Samael, mystical angel, carries that task, embodying both the terror and necessity of endings. Have you ever noticed how in life, endings often arrive disguised as losses, only to reveal themselves as transformations? That's the echo of Samael's presence moving quietly through existence. In many traditions, he is depicted as a serpent of Eden, a figure both reviled and revered. Imagine the serpent coiled around the tree, holding not just temptation, but also liberation. Samael, serpent of Eden, becomes more than a villain. He becomes the mirror of human longing for hidden truth. How many of us have felt that same pull, knowing that to reach for the forbidden fruit is dangerous, but also sensing that it's the only way to awaken? It's a pattern that repeats in countless stories, from myth to personal experience, each one whispering of Samael's esoteric meaning. Of course, people ask, is he a demon or angel? The answer is not comfortable, but it is illuminating. Samael, demon or angel, reflects the dual nature within all of us. Just like light cannot exist without shadow, creation cannot thrive without destruction. This is why Samael esoteric philosophy insists on paradox. He is both messenger and executioner, both poison and cure. And if you've ever gone through a painful ending only to discover that it freed you from illusions, you've walked in the footprints of Samael. Some scholars call him the fallen angel, others the angel of death mythology itself, but both agree on one thing. Samael symbolism resists simplicity. He embodies contradictions that refuse to be smoothed away. To the mystics, this isn't a flaw, but a secret doorway. They believed that by meditating on his name, they could confront hidden Gnosis, the truth that divine judgment always carries a shadow. And perhaps you've noticed that life has a way of forcing us to face what we'd rather avoid, stripping away masks until only what is essential remains. That's the poison of God at work. There are also stories of Samael and Lilith, a union of forces that together embody rebellion and freedom from imposed order. This pairing unsettled the religious orthodoxy because it dared to suggest that the very fabric of creation was woven with threads of disobedience and desire. Samael's hidden Gnosis is revealed here. Not everything that resists authority is evil, and not everything that obeys is good. Have you ever looked back at a choice others condemned, only to realize it was the one that gave you real freedom? That's Lilith's shadow entwined with Samael's serpent coil. The ancients knew that names weren't just labels, they were gateways. To speak Samael was to enter a space where divine judgment and spiritual poison meet, where hidden truth and forbidden knowledge are inseparable. This is why his name has survived across mystical traditions, from apocryphal writings to Jewish mysticism, always carrying that dangerous aura. And as we trace his path further back into ancient scriptures and Gnostic texts, we begin to see that his name was not born from fear alone, but from reverence for the mystery it concealed. When we look deeper into the shadow of tradition, Samael doesn't just appear in one isolated story. He weaves through countless ancient scriptures like a hidden thread. In apocryphal writings, he is never portrayed as a simple villain, but as a cosmic force that unsettles human understanding. These texts describe Samael as both the poison of God and the guardian of forbidden Gnosis, revealing him as more than an angel of death mythology. Have you ever noticed how suppressed knowledge always resurfaces, no matter how many times it is buried? Samael's presence in Jewish mysticism and Gnostic texts works exactly like that, an unkillable truth echoing through time. In Kabbalistic tradition, Samael in Kabbalah is tied to the Qliphoth, the shadow side of creation. While most focus on the tree of life, mystics whispered that the shadow tree bore its own fruits, and Samael was its dark angel of balance. This idea frightened the Orthodox because it suggested that divinity had a double face, one that gives life and another that dissolves it. Isn't that what we experience in reality? Every blessing comes with its shadow. Every new life implies an eventual death. Samael's mystical angel embodies that paradox, and ancient sages knew his role couldn't simply be erased from the story of existence. The Gnostic scriptures go even further, presenting Samael as the blind god, the serpent of Eden, or even the architect of hidden truth. To the Gnostics, he was not just an adversary, but also the one who opened humanity's eyes. Samael's forbidden knowledge is described as a poison that awakens, breaking the illusion that creation was perfect. Just as a bitter medicine shocks the body into healing, Samael's spiritual poison awakens the soul by dissolving false purity. Have you ever had a truth sting you so deeply that it felt like poison, only to later realize it freed you? That was the living metaphor of Samael in ancient thought. In Jewish mysticism, Samael's Jewish mysticism is always depicted as an unavoidable figure, both hated and necessary. He is described as the prosecutor in the heavenly court, the one who points out flaws no one dares to admit. Think of him as the force that drags secrets out of the shadows. And isn't that what growth demands of us? Facing the uncomfortable, confronting the poison we carry. Samael's hidden Gnosis is not about worshipping him. It's about recognizing that destruction is as sacred as creation, and endings hold as much wisdom as beginnings. Some of these texts even describe Samael and the Watchers, those angels who descended to teach forbidden knowledge to humanity. Together, they represent the uneasy truth that enlightenment is never free. It always carries risk. Samael's esoteric meaning lies exactly in this danger. Knowledge that liberates can also destroy. Have you ever learned something about a friend, a partner, or even yourself that changed everything forever? That bittersweet moment, when the veil lifts and innocence is lost, that's the archetype of Samael working in human lives. Other scriptures describe him in connection with Lilith, reinforcing the theme of rebellion against imposed order. Samael and Lilith become the embodiment of shadow truth, forces that humanity tried to suppress but could never erase. That union terrified scholars, but seekers understood it as a key. Samael's symbolism here is not about glorifying evil, but about unveiling the forbidden Gnosis that reveals the double nature of existence. Just like a seed must crack and rot before it grows, forbidden truths often appear poisonous before they nourish the soul. As we move through these ancient writings, whether Gnostic, Kabbalistic, or apocryphal, it becomes clear that Samael was never a footnote. He was a pillar of hidden philosophy, always present where light and shadow meet. These traditions didn't just warn about him, they preserved his name because they knew it carried spiritual weight. And if in these old scriptures he emerges as both angel and adversary, then perhaps what they were really trying to show us is that the angel of death mythology isn't about fear. It's about a hidden technology of the soul, one that becomes clearer as we step into the next layer of his role. In Jewish mysticism, Samael is not a shadow to be ignored, but a figure woven directly into the fabric of divine judgment. He is described as the angel of death mythology, a mystical angel who walks the fine line between divine order and human fear. Unlike the simple notion of a grim reaper, Samael, angel of death, is both prosecutor and executioner, reminding humanity that every breath is borrowed time. Think about it. We live as though tomorrow is guaranteed, yet every tradition that speaks of Samael insists on the opposite. Life is fragile, and he is the one who reveals that truth. Samael Jewish mysticism often depicts him as consort of Lilith, the first rebel weaving together death and desire. This pairing scandalized theologians, but to the mystics it reflected the unavoidable truth that endings and beginnings are entwined. Samael and Lilith represent the dangerous freedom of rejecting imposed order, and isn't that exactly what we fear most? Freedom that comes at the cost of certainty. Their union was never about romance, it was about spiritual poison and the forbidden gnosis of what lies beyond obedience. Some say that's why their names were erased, only to survive in whispered prayers and occult secrets. Ancient texts even describe Samael as adversary of Israel, the angel who wrestled Jacob, the dark angel who always stands at the threshold. It's not that he is pure evil, but that he represents the test no one can escape. Samael esoteric meaning shows that death is not just an end, but an initiation of death, the trial that strips away every mask. Have you ever gone through something so painful it felt like it might end you, only to come out stronger, clearer, even freer? That's the hidden truth of Samael at work. Mystics often taught that Samael, fallen angel, is not an enemy of God, but a servant who fulfills the harshest tasks of divine justice. He is the shadow side of mercy, the one who brings closure where no one else dares. Samael occult secrets lie in this duality. He kills, yet he liberates. He destroys, yet he completes. Isn't that the same paradox we face when we let go of something toxic in our lives? It feels like death, but only later do we see the space it made for new growth. In this sense, Samael's spiritual poison dissolves what we cling to, so that we may finally breathe again. The mystics saw his work as balance, not cruelty. Samael's hidden gnosis shows that destruction itself is holy when it clears away what resists divine order. Just as a gardener cuts branches to save the tree, Samael's role is to prune existence. He embodies forbidden knowledge in the most unsettling way, by forcing humans to see the truth they avoid. And honestly, how many times have we resisted change, only to realize later that what we lost was the very thing that held us back? That's the angel of death mythology alive in human experience. In these traditions, Samael esoteric philosophy becomes a mirror of mortality. To study him is to confront the shadow of our own lives, the part we never want to name. This is why rabbis and mystics spoke his name with both fear and reverence. Samael's symbolism was never meant to terrify alone. It was meant to awaken awareness. He is the cosmic reminder that everything ends, and that endings are not mistakes but sacred necessities. And if you've ever sat with someone in their final moments, you've felt that paradox of pain and peace, Samael's hidden truth resting quietly in the room. The more we trace his role in Jewish mysticism, the clearer it becomes that Samael, mystical angel, is not just a mythic figure, but a reflection of something woven into existence itself. He teaches that endings are as divine as beginnings, that death rituals are not desecrations but bridges, and this is where the mystery deepens. If poison can be a medicine, then perhaps death itself hides a technology of transformation, leading us into the next veil of Samael's role. When ancient mystics called Samael the poison of God, they weren't speaking of venom in the veins, but of a spiritual force that dissolves illusions. Samael's spiritual poison is described as a divine technology, a dissolving agent that strips away false purity and reveals hidden truth. It's unsettling to imagine poison as sacred, but think about how medicine works. What heals in the right dose can also kill in excess. Samael esoteric meaning follows the same law. His poison breaks down attachments, dissolving lies we tell ourselves. How many times have you had to face a bitter truth before finding freedom? That's the hidden gnosis Samael embodies. The mystics saw poison as initiation. To encounter Samael, angel of death, was to drink from a cup that few dared to touch, because it burned away what was false. Samael, forbidden knowledge, worked like fire, painful, consuming, yet purifying. Isn't it curious how life often forces us into experiences we resist, only to realize later they were the very things that prepared us for transformation? That's poison as divine technology. It hurts, but it awakens. Just like the serpent of Eden, Samael, serpent of Eden, delivers knowledge wrapped in danger, leaving us forever changed. Samael apocryphal writings describe his poison not as punishment, but as a sacred tool. It's a dissolving force that clears the way for deeper vision. Imagine pouring acid over a corroded metal surface, not to destroy it, but to strip it clean so its true form shines. Samael esoteric philosophy insists the same about the soul. His role is to strip away what's corroded, even if the process feels unbearable. Haven't you noticed that the hardest losses often become the ones that shape us the most? That sting is Samael's hidden gnosis at work. Think of spiritual poison as a mirror of life itself. Everything we consume, food, thoughts, relationships, has the potential to nourish or to poison. Samael's hidden truth lies in teaching us discernment. In Jewish mysticism, Samael and Lilith embody this paradox by showing that rebellion, though seen as toxic, can sometimes be the antidote to stagnation. Samael's symbolism forces us to ask, what poisons are killing us, and which poisons might actually free us? It's a dangerous question, but one that opens doors to forbidden gnosis. Gnostic texts saw Samael as the one who blinded and awakened at once, giving humanity the poison of knowledge. This is not knowledge that flatters, but knowledge that cuts. Samael and the Watchers carry the same message. Illumination comes at a price. And isn't that true of every deep awakening? Once you see reality as it is, you can't go back to innocence. Samael mystical angel stands exactly at that threshold, forcing the soul to choose whether it will cling to illusion or accept the bitter medicine of truth. Even the notion of poison has layers of initiation. Alchemists used poison as a metaphor for transformation, knowing that the very substance that kills can, when transmuted, heal. Samael occult secrets suggest the same, that divine poison is a passage, not a punishment. It burns away what resists light, even if the process feels like destruction. If you've ever left behind a toxic relationship, a limiting belief, or a destructive habit, you've already tasted a drop of this poison. And though it felt like death, it was actually initiation of death leading toward renewal. So when Samael is named the poison of God, it is not to frighten, but to reveal a sacred mechanism. His role is not random cruelty. It is technology, a design encoded in creation itself. And if poison is technology, then death, too, must be more than an end. It begins to look like a carefully crafted initiation, one that prepares us for what lies beyond this veil. Samael has always been described in contradictions: angel and demon, servant and rebel, poison and cure. This dual nature is not a flaw, but his essence. Samael's dual nature forces us to see that reality itself is not black and white, but a dance of opposites. Think about it. Day cannot exist without night, life without death, or creation without destruction. Samael, mystical angel, embodies that balance, showing that the same hand that strikes can also heal. Haven't you noticed how the hardest endings often carry the seed of renewal? That's his signature, hidden within every cycle of life. In Kabbalah, Samael in Kabbalah is presented as both accuser and protector, a figure who unsettles precisely because he refuses to fit into simple categories. Samael esoteric philosophy tells us that to understand him is to accept paradox. It's like fire. It can warm or destroy depending on how it's used. The ancients called him the poison of God, not because he was purely evil, but because he carried the dangerous medicine of transformation. And if poison awakens, then perhaps destruction itself is not cruelty but a necessary reset. Stories often portray him as Samael, fallen angel, yet they also name him the angel of death mythology, carrying out divine judgment without hesitation. How can one be both condemned and chosen? This is the forbidden gnosis hidden in his figure, that the categories of good and evil are too small to hold the immensity of his role. Samael hidden gnosis insists that duality is sacred. And maybe that's why people fear him, because he reflects the truth that no soul is purely light or purely shadow, but always both. Even Samael's symbolism in apocryphal writings reinforces this duality. Some passages call him the serpent of Eden, the one who brought forbidden knowledge. Others describe him as God's dark angel, the executor of divine justice. The contradiction is deliberate. Samael's esoteric meaning is not in choosing one identity over the other, but in recognizing that he holds both at once. Have you ever felt torn between choices, realizing both carried truth and risk? That tension is Samael's nature living in us. The union of Samael and Lilith is another reflection of his duality. She, the embodiment of rebellion and desire. He, the angel of death and judgment. Together they symbolize freedom born out of danger, a kind of esoteric marriage of shadow forces. Samael and Lilith remind us that what society calls destructive may, in secret, be liberating. And isn't it true that some of the choices others call mistakes are the very ones that open our deepest growth? That's the forbidden knowledge of their union, freedom and danger intertwined. Samael, hidden truth is that his duality is not meant to confuse, but to awaken. By standing in both realms, angelic and demonic, he becomes a bridge. Samael's occult secrets suggest that this bridge is what mystics sought when they invoked him. A passage between extremes, a way to hold light and darkness together without collapsing into fear. It's the same inner alchemy every human faces, integrating shadow and light into one whole self. That's why Samael is not just a myth, but a map. This cosmic duality doesn't resolve. It invites us deeper. Samael's esoteric philosophy leaves us with the question, if poison can heal and destruction can liberate, then perhaps the Serpent of Eden wasn't a curse but a key. And as we step into the next mystery, we find that this dual nature leads directly to the forbidden knowledge of the fall itself. The story of Eden is often told as a warning, but when we place Samael at its center, it becomes something else entirely. Samael's Serpent of Eden embodies the paradox of the fall. Was it a curse, or was it the first awakening of human consciousness? In forbidden Gnosis, he is not just the tempter, but the one who revealed the hidden truth, the poison of God that opened human eyes. Think about it. Every great leap in awareness often begins with disobedience. Have you ever broken a rule, only to realize that in doing so, you gained freedom others never dared to touch? That's the essence of Samael's presence in the garden. In Samael Gnostic texts, the fall is reframed not as humanity's failure, but as humanity's initiation. He brings the knowledge of good and evil, knowledge that condemned and liberated at once. This is why Samael and forbidden knowledge are always spoken in the same breath. His poison is the spark that shatters innocence, a bitter gift that forces growth. And doesn't that mirror our own lives? The very moments we wish had never happened are often the ones that shape us the most. Samael, mystical angel, carries that same paradox, destruction that transforms. Samael, Jewish mysticism, whispers of him as the hidden hand guiding the fall, not for chaos, but for revelation. He becomes the shadow of divine judgment, forcing Adam and Eve, and by extension all of us, to step into a reality where choice has weight. Samael's esoteric meaning here is terrifying yet liberating. Innocence is not strength, and ignorance is not purity. The forbidden Gnosis of the fall insists that only by knowing shadow can humanity grow into the fullness of light. And isn't it true that growth never comes without scars? Apocryphal writings go even further, linking Samael and the Watchers to the transmission of hidden Gnosis. They are said to have taught metallurgy, enchantments, and even astral secrets, echoing the serpent's role in Eden. Samael's occult secrets live in these stories as reminders that knowledge is never neutral. It always transforms the one who receives it. Think of fire. It can cook food or burn down a city depending on who wields it. Samael's spiritual poison carries the same duality, awakening, but at a cost. This cost is what terrified the Orthodox traditions. To them, Samael, fallen angel, was a rebel, a corrupter, the one who brought ruin into the world. But to the mystics, Samael, hidden Gnosis, was unavoidable. They understood that to eat the fruit, to take the poison, was to begin the journey of self-awareness. Isn't that the same with life's hardest lessons? They wound us, yet without them, we would remain children forever. Samael, demon or angel, becomes less of a title and more of a mirror. He reflects the danger and necessity of growth. The symbolism of the serpent has survived for millennia, precisely because it captures this forbidden knowledge. Samael's symbolism as the serpent coiled around the tree shows how enlightenment is always wrapped in danger. Have you noticed how the truths that change your life the most are usually the ones you resist hearing? That resistance is the taste of poison, the same poison that, once swallowed, dissolves illusions. Samael's initiation of death begins here, in the act of awakening through what was forbidden. So, when we revisit the fall not as a punishment, but as a passage, Samael emerges not only as an adversary, but as a guide. His poison awakened the human race, and his forbidden Gnosis turned paradise into a battlefield of growth. And if Eden was not lost but transformed, then the angel of death mythology expands into something even greater. Samael as the gatekeeper of the machinery beyond the veil, where death itself becomes a continuation of this hidden knowledge. Mystics often describe Samael not just as the angel of death, but as the one who governs the machinery of death beyond the veil. This isn't merely about the end of breath, but about a process, a cosmic mechanism designed to strip the soul of what no longer belongs to it. Samael, angel of death mythology, paints him as the one who severs the silver cord, guiding souls into realms unknown. Have you ever wondered why so many cultures share stories of a guide at the moment of death? That archetype finds its most striking embodiment in Samael, mystical angel, the dark angel who both terrifies and liberates. In Jewish mysticism, Samael Jewish mysticism is depicted as the prosecutor who escorts souls into divine judgment. His role is not only to end life, but to weigh it, exposing the hidden truth that the living try to hide. Samael's symbolism here becomes unavoidable. He is the mirror held up at the last moment, showing every mask we've worn and every truth we've ignored. Isn't that what makes death so frightening? Not just the end, but the revelation of what we've truly become. Samael's hidden Gnosis insists this unveiling is part of the initiation of death itself. Gnostic texts sometimes describe him as a devourer of energies, feeding on the release of spirit at the moment of passing. This may sound terrifying, yet Samael's forbidden knowledge reframes it. He is not stealing us but transforming. Just as fire consumes wood to create light and heat, Samael's spiritual poison consumes the illusions of the soul, releasing its essence into higher realms. Have you ever burned old letters or objects, watching the flames reduce them to ash? That ritual mirrors what Samael does to the soul. He clears what cannot be carried forward. In apocryphal writings, Samael and the Watchers are tied to rituals of death and transition, suggesting that those who understood his role could harness this machinery in sacred rites. Samael occult secrets whisper that death rituals were never just about mourning, but about navigation, ensuring the soul did not wander, but moved with guidance. Some traditions even speak of invoking Samael in these rituals, not as a curse, but as a guide. Imagine standing at the threshold, and instead of resisting, allowing the dark angel to take your hand. That was the secret some initiates dared to embrace. Even the concept of poison as divine technology echoes here. Samael's esoteric meaning in death is the final dose, the dissolution of the body's illusions so that the soul can return to its source. Think of a cocoon breaking open. The caterpillar must die so the butterfly can emerge. Samael's hidden truth operates the same way. Death is not an erasure but a transformation, a tearing down of one form to release another. And though it feels like an ending, mystics saw it as the most sacred passage. This is why Samael's esoteric philosophy insists that death is not an enemy, but a stage in the journey of Gnosis. To know Samael is to recognize that death rituals are not only about loss, but about initiation. If life is the classroom, death is the final exam. And Samael is the one who delivers the questions no one can avoid. Doesn't that make every moment of living a preparation for that encounter? In this way, every small death, every ending, every letting go, becomes a rehearsal for the final passage. So when mystics spoke of Samael's machinery of death beyond the veil, they weren't describing cruelty but design. They saw in him the architect of transition, the dark angel who ensures no soul remains trapped between realms. And if death itself is a technology, then perhaps the living sought to use it through invocations, through rituals, through daring contact with the angel of death to bend reality itself. which is where we now step into the forbidden realm of the elite's invocation of Samael. Throughout history, whispers have suggested that secret orders and hidden priesthoods dared to call upon Samael, not as a figure of worship, but as a force to be used. Samael elite invocation was said to corrupt rulers, topple kingdoms, and bend reality itself through forbidden rites. Imagine the kind of desperation or ambition it would take to summon the poison of God, knowing his presence dissolves everything false. Yet power has always tempted the ambitious, and Samael occult secrets offered exactly that, a key to realities beyond the grasp of ordinary men. In Jewish mysticism and Samael apocryphal writings, there are fragments describing him as a dark angel, courted by those who wanted to rule not just people, but fate itself. Samael's spiritual poison could unravel political structures, sowing decay in kingdoms until only the summoner's will remained. Isn't it curious that throughout history, empires rise and fall in strangely patterned cycles of corruption and collapse? Some mystics would claim that behind these collapses was not just human error, but invocation, the hidden hand of Samael, moving silently through thrones. Even the union of Samael and Lilith appears here, not as myth, but as ritual. Elites were said to recreate this union symbolically, binding themselves to rebellion and death in exchange for insight. Samael and Lilith represented liberation through dissolution. A forbidden Gnosis, elites believed, could grant them access to realities that common mortals feared. It's unsettling, isn't it? The thought that leaders might have tied themselves to the serpent of Eden, not to resist him, but to drink from his poison willingly. Samael in Kabbalah was also invoked in esoteric courts, where judges, kings, and priests sought the angel of death mythology not for protection, but for destruction. They asked him to strip rivals of their fortune, to dissolve the lives of enemies. To invoke Samael Dark Angel was to unleash spiritual poison on demand. And though it sounds like the stuff of grim tales, doesn't history show us enough bloodlines consumed by their own shadows? Perhaps those rituals left stains not only in souls, but in entire dynasties. Occult texts suggest that Samael's esoteric philosophy was misunderstood by those elites, who used his poison selfishly instead of reverently. They saw him as a weapon, not as an initiation. But poison does not discriminate. It kills illusions bitterly, but it also consumes those who wield it. Samael's hidden truth is that anyone who dares to control him ends up controlled by the very poison they thought to command. Think of power like fire. It can cook your meal or burn down your home, depending on how it's handled. Samael's fire always exacts a price, and yet the allure never disappeared. Samael's hidden Gnosis was passed through bloodlines, whispered in secret societies, echoed in rituals cloaked as politics or religion. The idea that death itself could be harnessed was too intoxicating to resist. Imagine the temptation: bending mortality, corrupting rivals, tasting forbidden knowledge that others fear. That's the dream Samael offers to the elite. But it's a dream poisoned from the start. For with every invocation comes dissolution, and sooner or later, the poison spreads to the summoner. So, when mystics warn of Samael elite invocation, they're not only condemning it morally, they are exposing its cost. To summon Samael is to risk your own soul, to trade certainty for Gnosis, safety for shadow. And this leads us to the greatest warning of all, the peril of simply calling his name, a danger that extends far beyond the chambers of kings or secret societies. To speak the name of Samael is to step onto a path with no guarantee of return. Ancient mystics warned that invoking him was not just ritual but risk. Samael's spiritual poison does not come selectively. Once called, it dissolves everything it touches, starting with the summoner's own illusions. Samael, Angel of Death, is not a passive figure. He is the dark angel who arrives when invited, carrying the forbidden Gnosis that mortals are rarely prepared to hold. Haven't you noticed how certain truths, once spoken, can never be unsaid? His name works exactly like that. Once unleashed, it cannot be taken back. Apocryphal writings describe Samael's hidden truth as dangerous precisely because of its clarity. To invoke him is to strip away masks and confront what lies beneath. Samael's esoteric philosophy insists that most people do not fear him because he kills, but because he reveals. And revelation can feel worse than death itself. Imagine looking into a mirror that not only shows your face, but your soul. your failures, your unspoken desires. Would you dare to gaze? That's the peril of Samael's name. It forces the gaze, ready or not. In Jewish mysticism, Samael Jewish mysticism is portrayed as adversary of Israel, a relentless prosecutor who spares no flaw. To call him is to invite judgment without mercy. Samael, dark angel, embodies divine justice stripped of compassion. And isn't that what terrifies us about death? That it ends negotiation, ends excuses, ends delay. Samael initiation of death begins in the moment his name is spoken, because to invoke him is to invite the final test, whether or not you are ready. Gnostic traditions painted an even starker picture. Samael demon or angel could mimic light, appearing as an angelic guide, only to devour the unprepared soul. Samael occult secrets warn that this deception is part of his nature. Not cruelty, but initiation. Only those willing to see beyond appearances can survive. Think about it. How often are we fooled by what looks beautiful or harmless, only to discover it was poison? Samael, serpent of Eden, carries that same lesson, reminding us that appearances are the most fragile layer of truth. Some esoteric accounts tell of seekers who obsessed over Samael, repeating his name in rituals until their minds fractured. Samael, forbidden knowledge, is not entertainment. It's fire, and obsession with fire burns. Samael, hidden Gnosis, is a blade with no handle. To grip it carelessly is to bleed. Haven't you seen people consumed by their own pursuit of power, knowledge, or control, until it destroyed them? That is the peril of Samael's invocation. His poison consumes both what is false and what is unprepared. The mystics insisted that Samael esoteric meaning was never meant for casual seekers. His name was guarded, spoken only in rare contexts, and even then with trembling, because Samael's symbolism is not just myth, it's a mechanism. His presence tears the veil, and once it opens, there's no closing it again. To call Samael is to agree to a contract without knowing its terms. And doesn't every deal with forbidden power end with the price written in blood? So the warning remains, to speak Samael is to step into dissolution, to risk one's soul for a glimpse of hidden Gnosis. And if his name alone carries such peril, then perhaps the greatest question is not whether he should be invoked, but what reflection he offers us about humanity itself. Which brings us to the final initiation, Samael as mirror, the reflection of death and shadow that humanity cannot escape. To face Samael is to face ourselves. Mystics called him the mirror of humanity's shadow, the one who reflects not just our virtues, but every hidden fracture within the soul. Samael, mystical angel, doesn't arrive with comfort. He arrives with clarity, and clarity can sting like poison. Samael's spiritual poison kills illusions, stripping us bare until only truth remains. And in that moment, the question arises, is this death or is this initiation? Haven't you noticed how the hardest trials in life feel like endings, but later reveal themselves as beginnings in disguise? That paradox is Samael's gift. In Jewish mysticism, Samael Jewish mysticism is the adversary who becomes teacher by force. His very opposition awakens growth. Samael esoteric meaning is that the angel of death mythology is less about destruction and more about transformation. Think of a snake shedding its skin. It looks like death, but it's a renewal. Samael hidden Gnosis functions the same way. By tearing away the masks we cling to, he forces us to confront who we really are. Isn't that what every spiritual path ultimately demands? The courage to face the self. In Gnostic scriptures, Samael and forbidden knowledge represent the bitter fruit that awakens humanity. His reflection is the reminder that paradise without awareness is no paradise at all. Samael, serpent of Eden, shows us that to live without consciousness is to live half asleep, and yet to awaken is to lose innocence forever. That's the paradox. His poison awakens, but it also wounds. Have you ever realized a truth you wished you could unlearn, yet knew you couldn't survive without? That tension is Samael's mirror, sharp and unavoidable. Apocryphal writings describe Samael, fallen angel, as the one who embodies divine judgment and shadow in equal measure. Samael dual nature reveals that life itself is woven with both mercy and severity. When we look into his mirror, we see not a monster, but ourselves, our capacity for creation and destruction alike. Samael esoteric philosophy insists that the real terror is not Samael himself, but what he reflects back, and perhaps that's why his name has lingered, because humanity needs this mirror, even if it fears what it shows. Even the legends of Samael and Lilith reflect this initiatory truth. Together they embody rebellion, freedom, and the hidden gnosis that comes from stepping outside imposed order. Samael's symbolism here teaches that what society calls poison may be the very medicine we need. Haven't you felt that moment when rejecting what others expected of you felt terrifying, yet turned out to be liberation? That's the initiation Samael and Lilith embody. A poison that frees, a shadow that illuminates. The mystics knew that calling Samael was dangerous, but they also knew that resisting his reflection was impossible. Samael's hidden truth is that death itself is not a curse, but the final awakening. Samael's initiation of death is the ultimate mirror, the passage that strips us of every mask. And if death is not the end but the doorway to truth, then perhaps Samael is less executioner and more guide. Isn't that why so many feared and revered him at once? Because to see him was to glimpse the hidden gnosis of our own mortality. So the initiatory reflection of Samael is not just about him, it is about us. He is the forbidden gnosis personified, the poison of God that kills illusions and awakens reality. And when we see him not as demon or angel but as mirror, we begin to understand that the true question is not, who is Samael, but what will I see when he shows me myself? That is the riddle he leaves us with, the open wound of mystery that prepares us for the journey still ahead. So now I'll ask you, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you treat Samael's forbidden gnosis as just another story, or will you dare to reflect on the poison of God within your own life? And remember, this isn't about worshipping shadows, it's about recognizing how endings, trials, and even death itself are initiations. Samael, mystical angel, stands as a mirror, and the question is, what do you see when you look into it? Have you ever noticed how much of your life is spent avoiding the truth of endings? What illusions are you still clinging to, hoping they'll never dissolve? And what if the very dissolution you fear is the one thing that could finally set you free? These are not abstract questions, they're invitations to transformation. The real danger isn't Samael, it's ignoring the reflection he forces us to face. So, I challenge you, what poisons are holding you back, and are you willing to let them become medicine? What if death, in all its forms, isn't a curse, but the final awakening you've been resisting? If this journey shook something inside you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, activate the notifications, and keep walking with me through the mysteries others fear to touch. Because the next veil always waits, and together we'll pierce it.